State Senator and Democratic candidate for Texas Attorney General Nathan Johnson, thank you so much and welcome back to Eye on Politics.
Good morning. Good to be here, Jack.
Good to see you. So on March 3rd, you won more than 1 million votes. You had 48% of the vote, came real close to winning outright against Joe Jaworski and Tony Box, and now you are in a runoff against Joe Jaworski. So what is your plan to win this time around?
Not different than it was to win the first time around, and it would have been nice to get 2 more points. But in the runoff, we have to be a little more precise. The electorate is going to be roughly a quarter, we expect, of what it was then. So the way you reach people is just strategically a little bit more precise in your targeting. But Jack, the messaging is the same. Democrats want somebody who can win an election and who can be productive on the job. That was my message. That's my history. We'll be pushing the exact same message, the exact same history with voters this time around, aiming to clinch this race. And really, I'm thinking about November because I think I have a really important job to do, and that is to win this election against the Republican nominee in November. So, they used to say in high school track, run through the tape. We are running through May 26th with our eye on November 3rd.
So the third candidate in the race, Tony Box, as I mentioned before, he told me he's staying neutral. So what are you doing to reach his supporters?
I'm trying to reach Tony Box supporters, Joe Jaworski supporters, and Nathan Johnson supporters, because as we just said, this electorate in the runoff is going to be a very small subset of what it was on March 3rd. You have to give everybody confidence that you can win the race and that you can do the job. I think in the case of people who voted for Tony Box, I think they looked at his background. He had a very interesting resume. He had been in positions where there's just not a lot of politics at play, and I think that they're looking for a candidate who understands that the Attorney General's job has to be depoliticized. So I'm emphasizing in my messaging to reassure those voters that when I get into the Attorney General's office, I'm not going to do what Ken Paxton has done, which is turn this into a propaganda machine for a particular political party. My obligation is to make sure that the rule of law is upheld, that consumers are protected, that market competition is enforced, that people are safe. Those kinds of things just get the job done, putting the politics aside. I think Tony Box's voters are looking for that. So are Nathan Johnson voters. So are Joe Jaworski voters. I'd actually like all the voters in the election on May 26th. And we'll be trying to communicate with every one of them.
So what do you want to do? What are your top 2 or 3 agenda items if you get elected in November?
These are the affirmative items, and then there's the stop doing it items. The easiest thing to talk about is don't do what Ken Paxton has been doing, which is politicizing the office, turning it into precisely the partisan tool that the framers of the Constitution never wanted it to be. They always intended for the Attorney General's office to operate with independence and integrity. Let's return that. My top priority is to populate the Attorney General's office with really good people. 4,000 employees, 800 lawyers. The ideologues can go somewhere else. People with institutional expertise who are committed to public service, whether they're currently working in the Ken Paxton Attorney General's office or new, we are going to rebuild the culture of that office, because I think that's critically important, that we have an office that wants to serve the people of this state. As far as policy objectives or stylistically what we intend to do, I am going to protect the state from federal government overreach. My goal is not to sue the Trump administration at every chance I get, but he violates the law a lot, and when he does, I'm going to sue him. I'm going to protect people's individual rights. I'm going to protect the public schools and business operations that are dependent on dollars that have already been appropriated to the state of Texas. So a second agenda item is to make sure that the federal government does not mess up what we otherwise could do well here in Texas to protect people's individual rights. And then finally, attorneys general are supposed to be guardians of market competition. I do think over the past half century, we have allowed the commercial sector to become hyper-consolidated, we've allowed the commercial sector to co-opt and take over the political sector, to actually control the very entities that are supposed to be regulating the commercial sector. Who cares? We care because quality has gone down, prices have gone up, and consumers are being manipulated and taken advantage of in the commercial sector. Attorneys general are supposed to make sure that the competitive market is competitive. I will bring emphasis back on that element of the office.
Give me an example.
Well, if you take a look at hotel concentration, if you look at healthcare concentration, if you look at ownership of multifamily residences, if you look at big tech, actually that's an area where I think there's some people in Ken Paxton's office who've done some good work going after big tech. These are global phenomenon, and I'm not saying there's necessarily bad people in these industries. It is the natural tendency of powerful corporations to try to get more powerful. It is the duty of government to make sure that they don't control the rules of the game and are forced to compete. All of those are examples. And we'll be working in conjunction with attorneys general across the state, Republican and Democratic, and I'll have 800 lawyers who are really good at this stuff, making sure that we find places where the rules are being violated, where we do have too much concentration of power, where we've lost the benefit of competition and innovation. It's affecting labor, it's affecting prices, it's affecting availability, it's affecting supply chains, it affects politics. Those things need attention, and I will bring it.
So you talked before about you're not going to, I remember what Governor Abbott said when he was Attorney General. He woke up, went to work,
Yep.
He sued the Obama administration, then he went home, and that was the daily thing. You're saying that's not going to be with the Trump administration?
Well, it's cute, but it's not good policy. I probably would have already sued the Trump administration literally dozens of times. It's just because he's so prolific in violating the Constitution and the Administrative Procedures Act and state law and individual rights. It's not because I want to sue the president, but whether it's a Democratic president or a Republican president, there is a temptation, a tendency right now in the United States globally for the executive to be overly assertive. I believe in separation of powers. And my role will be to sue the federal government when powers are not properly respected, either principles of federalism as between state and federal government, or separation of powers between courts, legislatures, and the executive.
But are you really going to file a lawsuit against a Democratic president?
Of course I would. Of course I would. I opposed the Biden administration's Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services. I actually led the Democrats in the Texas legislature in opposing what the Biden administration was doing in the Medicaid space, because I think they were violating federal law and it was harming Texas citizens and Texas healthcare systems. It's not my goal to sue a Democrat or a Republican, but I have a job to do, and I will do it no matter who's in office.
So my next question is, and I think we've talked about this before, how do you, as Attorney General, if you're elected, defend a state law in court that you disagree with?
The only time I have to defend a state law is if it is challenged on grounds of legality. Either it's unconstitutional,
Right.
violates federal law. If it's unconstitutional, I'm not defending it, and here's why. The Texas Constitution does not make the Attorney General the lawyer for the legislature. The Attorney General is not the lawyer for the governor. If they wanted to do that, they would have had the governor appoint the Attorney General, or they would have had the legislature nominate the Attorney General, or at least confirm the Attorney General. It doesn't. They wanted the Attorney General to be an independent force. I'm not the legislature's lawyer. I'm not Abbott's lawyer. I'm not an agency's lawyer. I represent the state in actions against an agency, in actions against a law. And if the legislature passes a law that I really hate, but it's legal, I will defend the legislature's right to pass bad laws because I think it's important that we respect the powers of government and the way we framed things. I will not defend the legislature's passage of unconstitutional laws, laws that violate individual rights. I will not defend the legislature's passage of a requirement that schools place the 10th Commandment in classrooms because it's unconstitutional.
So the state would basically have to go out and hire a private lawyer.
Yeah, if they want to defend unconstitutional laws, and that might be a good conversation for me to have with the legislature before they pass the next ill-advised unconstitutional law. Jack, can I give you a really interesting example
Please.
where we're seeing this play out right now in real time?
Sure.
The Texas legislature many years ago passed the Historically Underutilized Businesses Act. The acting Texas comptroller, a colleague of mine from the Senate, a friend of mine, did something I think very bad. He overstepped his authority as the comptroller, declared that state law unconstitutional, and shut down the program for all practical purposes. The Attorney General should have advised the comptroller, don't do that. You don't have the power to do that. The Attorney General should have put out an opinion if necessary. Right now, the Attorney General is supposed to be defending the legislature for that law, or should the Attorney General be defending the comptroller in his actions? And the Attorney General today is doing neither. He is sitting it out. That is abdication of responsibility.
What would you do?
Sometimes leadership takes guts, and it means you have to step in there and declare that the position of the state of Texas, i.e. me, the Attorney General, is that the comptroller does not have the authority to declare the constitutionality of something the legislature enacts. Now, if someone challenges the legislature's law, I can take a position as to whether or not to defend the law on the basis of constitutionality, or is it just a bad law. This gets down to the Attorney General's role to make government work. There should not be an argument between the Attorney General, the comptroller, and the legislature that is holding up the administration of a program. I happen to think that there are programs that I don't like that are in effect that I want to legislatively fix, but the Attorney General has to make sure all the pieces are moving.
And just for the viewers who are watching this, the benefit of this program, the HUB program, was to give female and minority-owned businesses a chance to get state and local government contracts.
Yeah, and what we found was, aside from, or distinct from being some sort of DEI program that people accuse it to be, it's really about having a competitive marketplace. What we found is consolidation of big players, and that the smaller businesses typically were owned by historically underutilized businesses. If you want to have real competition, real innovation, giving opportunities to businesses owned by women and minorities is a good way to get a competitive marketplace. And it wasn't a set aside. These laws have been challenged in states across the country for constitutionality and have been uniformly upheld. It's been upheld in Texas court. And it's continuing through the Texas courts, but it's not the comptroller's role to go after that.
So I want to ask you some other political questions, since you still have this runoff. And what are your biggest contrasts with Joe Jaworski?
I think there's two fundamental contrasts. We need somebody who can beat Republicans in an election. I'm the only one who's done it. I flipped a 30-year Republican seat in 2018. It was a -12 seat. Everybody, even in a good Democratic year, everybody said that race was unwinnable. I won it by 8 points. I have the same feeling, I have the same plan, the same intention, and I expect the same result in this statewide election. I think I can defeat the Republicans in November. I think there's only one of us that can do that. Secondly, I'm the one who has state government experience, and I think it's very important. I think Tony Box, Joe Jaworski, Nathan Johnson all agree that it's important to depoliticize the Attorney General's office, certainly strip the hyper right-wing partisanship out of the office. But you cannot get away from the fact that the Attorney General's office operates in a political space. And to be effective in that office, you have to have political skills honed through experience. I'm the one who has 8 years of experience in the legislature, working against Republicans, working with Republicans, working in support of agencies, working in conflict with agencies, with the governor, with the lieutenant governor. All that stuff requires political skill. So you need somebody who can win, and you need somebody who can be effective on the job when they get there.
And, to what you said, Jaworski has called you MAGA's favorite Democrat.
Jack, I hope I'm everyone's favorite Democrat. Primarily on May 26th, I want to be all the Democrats' favorite Democrat. But I intend to win this election in November, and anybody, whatever they voted in the past, I want them to look and say, you know what, I think that guy has this stuff figured out, and he's going to be on my side. That office of Attorney General will be representing the people of the Texas for the first time in decades. I don't care what their label is before that. Now, I think Joe's accusations are ridiculous. I think you can ask anybody from MAGA, and I'm not their favorite Democrat, because I've been at the forefront of every major Democratic fight that we've had in the last 8 years. So it's a silly accusation. He was down in the polls. He is desperate to discredit my record because I have a good record, so he says stuff like that. But I'm not letting it slow me down. I'm on my way to win in November, Jack.
Last question. How are you going to beat a Republican, whether it's State Senator Mays Middleton or Central Texas Congressman Chip Roy, in the fall?
Same way I did in 2018. In 2018, what we saw was a surge in Democratic voters, a massive break by centrist voters, undecided, independent, for Democrats, certain Democrats, and some crossover from the Republican Party. I think in Chip Roy and Mays Middleton, we have a non-representative candidate for the Republican Party. I think you're going to see a lot of Republican crossover. I think you're going to see independents and undecideds. absolutely say, whoa, that is not my agenda. I am not going that way. This Nathan Johnson guy seems to know what he's doing. I trust him. I'm going that way. And I think Democrats, you'll see a general surge across the state with interest in the U.S. Senate race, in the governor's race, in the comptroller's race, in my race. I think you'll see a massive surge in Democratic turnout. I don't think there's so much of a question as to whether or not I can hit 50%, Jack. I think the real question is the margin of victory. And I'm looking forward to it being very comfortable.
All right, State Senator Nathan Johnson and Democratic candidate for Texas Attorney General. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jack.
We appreciate it.